Welcome to the Freed from Stuck podcast. Our guest today is Roni Lambrecht, mother, author, and speaker. She's going to be sharing with us, before it's too late, learn how to parent at your best without regrets. And I'm your host, Susie Hayes. You can learn more about me at www.freedfromstuck.com. Now, let's get to our conversation. Hi, this is Susie Hayes, and I want to welcome you to the Freed from Stuck podcast. Death rates for children have fallen dramatically since 1980. But that statistic means absolutely nothing to you if you've lost a child. Roni Lambrecht was just what she calls a typical wife and mom from Castle Rock, Colorado, working long hours to make ends meet when her entire world changed in a split second. Her beautiful son, Dalton, left for heaven just after Christmas in 2013 due to injuries from an ATV versus Sandrail accident. Her son, Dalton, lived his short life creating smiles, laughter, and happiness by sharing his kind spirit and helping others through tough times. Roni and her husband, John, now continue his legacy by practicing random acts of kindness in Dalton's memory each day. They also help other parents living in the moment with their own children by sharing their truths about regret and finding beauty in the everyday chaos of family life. Roni graciously agreed to share her story and to tell us about her journey. Welcome, Roni. So good to see you.
Good to see you too, Susie. Thank you for having me.
So I would like you to just start with your story, the experience of the loss of Dalton, and talk about what that's been like for you and what has emerged, what has evolved out of that tragic loss.
Well, in December of 2013, we had taken a family vacation to the Glamis sand dunes in California so that we could ride our four-wheelers over the dunes, and it's one of our very favorite places as a family to go. We had a really great Christmas, and that was just with the three of us. And then on Sunday morning, the guys all decided they were going to find a new campsite to move to, where we would be closer to all the big action that was going on. And on the way there, Dalton was hit head-on by the sandrail and killed instantly. I always have to breathe at that moment. Sorry.
Right.
Anyway, and so our grief journey then began right then, obviously. So, and there's so much from the death to seeing him again for the first time 4 days later at the funeral home, to bringing his body home and all of the hoops you have to jump through to do that, to the cremation and the celebration and all of the things that you do when someone passes, and then dealing, with insurance and, all of the logistics of losing someone. And then once all of that kind of dies down, all the everyday logistics of there's 200 family members in town and there's all these people around and all that kind of stuff, is when you really find the quiet time and the darkness of grief. And so when we start down that journey, my husband John and I both really decided that if we have to do this, we're going to try and do justice by Dalton, by helping other families and helping current parents really be more mindful of the time with their children and learn from what our regrets are. And in doing so, we came up with a couple books that I've written, and And then in addition to that, then also really helping other parents who have lost a child. I will tell you that you never get over it. It's not a problem that you can ever solve. It's nothing that will ever leave you. Part of our job now is to teach people how to deal with grief. We're never ever taught that grief is something that, first of all, that we'll even have to deal with. But secondly, we're never ever taught that if we do have to deal with it, that there are better ways to handle it than others. So, John and I have kind of made it our journey now to really help people. So first of all, in the parenting aspect, to make sure that the parents that are still lucky enough to have their kids are using that time effectively, and that they are being mindful. And granted, is life difficult and overwhelming, and the daily chaos of life is crazy all the time. But when you do get the moments where you have your kid in the car with you, or you're making dinner together, or you're doing chores together, or you're on vacation together, whatever it is that you're doing, are you really making good, productive, effective time, making that a memorable moment? And just if you're going to be with your kid, shut your phone off, be with your kid. If you're going to go on a date with your spouse, shut your phone off and be with your spouse. So just be present, really take the moments that you've got, and use them to use all the tools that you've got to make sure that those moments are memorable and that you're making the most of your time, because you never know, an hour later, 15 minutes later, 2 days later, that person that you love and care about and that you wanted to spend time with is gone. So you want to make sure that you spend those moments effectively. And then if you do lose that person, or someone else in your life loses someone special to them, learning how to be effective, be an effective friend or family member in that position.
You spoke to so many important things there, but it's really about living in the present and seeing each opportunity for interaction as being precious.
Yes.
And really making a decision that when you are with someone, you are really fully with them. Yes. And enjoying and appreciating that opportunity for that interaction.
Yes.
You also talked about how grief is like carrying a suitcase with you for the rest of your life, and that it's you do it, as you said, you do it with grace, graciousness. Yes. And that is really a difficult thing because, and you touched on this as well, I always say that grief is the most difficult human task.
Yes.
And to the depth that we grieve is the depth of our love. So when we open our hearts, particularly to children, to the depth of that love is the depth of the grief. And I do think when you lose a younger child, there's a different kind of loss in that not only have they been taken from you, but all of the dreams and the hopes of the future have
Absolutely.
been taken.
Grandkids, weddings,
yes,
graduations, driver's licenses.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what was the most difficult thing for you in the grieving process? If you're able to be candid about that, what was the hardest part of that, the hardest experience in the grief for you?
Honestly, I think that's it's a daily thing. It's the finding a reason to be here. It's those moments where the wave hits you and you can't breathe, and the anxiety hits, and your body kind of forgets how to function for, it could be a split second, it could be a couple hours. And then there's still some times where I'll go 2 or 3 days where I feel like I can maybe have some clarity at a certain time of the day, and then other times everything's really foggy and it just hurts, and the things that grief does to your body, I can't even explain. And I hope people don't have to experience it, but literally my physical body, my heart, hurts. It physically hurts.
We're sometimes really uncomfortable talking about how difficult grieving is. It's such a difficult task that we don't want to experience it. We don't want to go through it. We don't want the emotional tsunami.
Right.
And yet that is part of the experience. If we're going to choose to love deeply, we're going to choose to grieve deeply. And if we don't know how to do that well, it is going to be immobilizing and toxic. And you're absolutely right with regard to the physical impact of grief and the trauma in the grieving, not just the trauma of the loss, but the trauma that we experience even in the grieving.
Absolutely.
So I think it is such a gift that you bring to allow yourself to speak truthfully with vulnerability to people about your experience and what it's like to go through that kind of loss of a child.
Absolutely.
And I'd love for you to take some time to really share about those elements that you feel are really important in parenting.
My husband has a ton of regrets, and there's and I think that when we lose someone very close to us, I think in a lot of cases we create regrets about things because I don't know, maybe in the subconscious mind, maybe it makes us feel like we're grieving properly if we have regrets, maybe. I don't know exactly how I would say that, but I talk to so many parents on a daily basis who have lost children, and many of them talk about their regrets. And, you know, I didn't spend time doing this, or I didn't do that, or I yelled too much, or I wasn't around enough, or I worked too much, that kind of a thing. And I think that, and this is kind of it's always been my whole life to really try and look on the positive side of things. But my husband, in his struggles and in our grief process, he has very consistently talked a lot about, I want other parents to do a better job than I did, so that if they lose their child, they don't have the same regrets that I do. And but there were so many funny things that John had regrets about, and one of the really crazy things, I think, again, not crazy to him, but crazy to me from an outsider looking into him, is many years ago Dalton and I were at the store, and we bought a bat and a ball and a glove, and he wanted to come home and he wanted John to play baseball with him in the yard. And we bought the bat and the ball and the glove, and we got home and they went on the shelf, and they literally never even came out of the packaging. And that's been many years before Dalton passed away. But Dalton never asked, can we play baseball? And John never said, let's go play baseball. And my son did not like sports ever. He, you know, played his guitar and played video games and rode his four-wheeler, and those were the things that made him happy. Playing baseball was not one of those things. But I will tell you, the very first thing that John had regrets about, that he spoke openly about, was that I never played baseball with Dalton. And I said, yeah, but look at all the dads out there who play baseball with their sons, and they never rode a four-wheeler with their kid. You know, they never took them camping. They never took them, you know, all the places that we took Dalton, you know, to ride. And, but John couldn't see that. He could only see that he didn't play baseball with Dalton. And so it's a very interesting dynamic to have when you know for a fact, I know for a fact, I would bet everything on it, that Dalton couldn't have given a bit of care to playing baseball. It was not important to him. If it was important to him, he would have pulled the baseball and the ball and the glove off of the shelf in the garage, and he would have played. But he didn't. But to John, that is a big time regret that he never played baseball with him. And every dad in America plays baseball with their kid except me. And so I think we come up with things. I think sometimes we make things up, but I also think there's some pretty serious regrets that we have. For John, it was often that he was too busy. He was always busy working, and then when he got home from work, he was busy with the yard and busy with the, in the garage, and busy changing oil in the cars or those kind of things. And for a lot of those years, he thought Dalton was too young to do those things. And so he didn't take the time to be teaching him while he was doing those things because, in a lot of dads' minds, or mom's minds, whichever, it takes too long to teach instead of you can just do it yourself and do it in half the time. And so that's another one of John's big regrets. For me, I work all the time. Both John and I have always been workaholics, and I will tell you that when Dalton was 5 years old, he came into my office and he asked if he could be on my calendar today. And that was really eye-opening for me that here my 5-year-old is smart enough to figure out that he has to be on my calendar to be important to me. And how eye-opening that was as a mother, that obviously I suck at this. I'm really bad at this. My kid thinks he has to be on my schedule for me to spend time with him. And that ate at me a lot. And that day I changed my world. I changed a lot of things.
And your reflections on this really speak to the desire of your heart to continue to improve as a parent.
Yes.
I mean, even with that conversation about putting Dalton on your calendar,
Mm-hmm.
you were open and receptive to that information and willing to make the changes that you needed to make to attend to that need.
Yes.
And I think that is so important because children don't expect parents to be perfect. They just want them to be present.
Yes.
And that's what you realized, was that he really just wanted you to be present in his life and to figure out how to do that better. But what else have you observed that children need? I mean, we know they need basic things like shelter and food and education. But apart from those basic needs, what do you know children need, and what do parents need to be attentive to in meeting those needs?
Well, one of the things that I love to share with parents is highs and lows, which is what we call it here. But at night before bed, Dalton and John and I would all crawl in Dalton's bed, and we would do our highs and lows. And Dalton would start, and he would tell us his highs and his lows, and we would talk about him. And then it was John's turn to do his, and then it was my turn to do mine. But in that, a few of the biggest points that I think are really important for parents to take away is that, first and foremost, by going kind of around the circle and telling our stories of the day or whatever, our highs and our lows of the day, what we were teaching Dalton in a roundabout way without saying it in so many words was that the world does not revolve around you. But I also think that we've just got to go on living, and we need to teach our kids to go on living and persevering and pushing through. And you don't see that a whole lot these days. You see mom and dad rescuing their kids when they got a B on their test that they thought they should get an A on, or they didn't turn in that homework and so they should get an extension, or they don't get a driver's license so they're going to drive them everywhere until they're 21 years old or whatever. There's so many things that we need to teach our kids to be more responsible adults. We're putting these people out into a world, and they need to be responsible. We need to be creating responsible people, teaching them about money, teaching them about how to repair things, having common sense about, if a light bulb goes out, you actually take the light bulb out and you put a new one in. I can tell you, I know a lot of teenagers that couldn't change a light bulb.
Wow, that leaves me speechless. Wow. Okay. The message that you are giving to parents about cultivating and moving children toward maturity and responsibility and self-reliance is so crucial. And then I think the other piece of that is the opportunity to encourage children to find purpose and meaning in their lives.
Yes.
Because if you don't have that, when those tough times come, and even when those even if you do have it and the tough times come, that can be shaken. Higher levels of suicide and anxiety, increased consumption of antidepressants. I mean, all of these issues that young children and adolescents are facing today very often is because they have not been taught how to cultivate that resilience. And so I think you are spot on in identifying this as a really important issue for parents today.
Yes, absolutely.
So as we're wrapping up today, I'd like to just give you a few minutes to share anything else that is on your mind that you feel is important. And I'll be sharing some contact information at the end of this conversation with people so they can contact you.
I really just hope that people will just stop and take a moment and decide that when they're going to be with someone, whoever that person be, for any length of time, that they are there and they're focused and they're present. And so often we go out to dinner and we'll see whole families on phones that are not paying attention to each other. And I would do anything to have a meal with my child again. And I hope that parents really think about doing that and putting their phones down and really focusing on those times with their kids. These kids aren't going to learn how to communicate just by osmosis. We have to teach them, and so that does take some hand-holding and teaching them how to ask poignant questions and ask things that they're interested in. So I think that that's important. So, and as far as contacting me, I'm open to speaking, obviously, with anybody. I'm not a trained counselor by any means or anything, but I'm open to speaking with anybody. I love to talk to anybody that is wanting information or wanting to talk or discuss their situation. If especially if someone's lost a child and they want to talk about that and the process, I'm happy to do so. So I can always be reached on my email at doitfordalton@gmail.com. And Dalton is spelled Dalton. So doitfordalton@gmail.com. And my books can be found on my website at parentingatyourbestwithoutregrets.com. So, yeah.
Very good. Beautiful. Thank you, Roni, for your time today. I appreciate all of the wisdom, really, that you have shared out of your experience and the transparency of both the pain and the gifts that have come out of this. That this grieving is not an easy process. And you have shown up even in this pain and reached out to other people in hopes that you can extend to them value and support and encouragement to continue on even in those most difficult times. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. I'd like to thank our special guest, Roni Lambrecht. You can find out more about her work and honoring of Dalton at www.parentingatyourbestwithoutregrets.com. And be sure and check out her book, available on her website and on Amazon, entitled Parenting at Your Best. You can also personally contact Roni at her email address, which is doitfordalton@gmail.com. I want to thank you for joining us. I'm Susie Hayes, your host, And if you know someone who might be interested in being interviewed on my podcast, please have them contact me. You can find out more information at www.freedfromstuck.com.